I couldn't believe it. I was fined $1,000 for growing too many vegetables.
The ability to grow food is mankind's greatest skill. If we think about it, we don't have a greater skill.
We've been robbed with this whole food situation. We got to be the change.
You're going to save a lot of money over going to the grocery store. And there are more and more people sticking their necks out there every day to try to give it a go.
In South Central LA, Ron Finley became an urban gardening renegade who helps empower people to take control of their own food supply.
And we're off. I like to call food deserts food prisons because that's what you have to escape to get healthy food. Well, first thing you see, what? Liquor store! But we can drive for miles, literally, and not see any place to eat healthy food. Before we have food again, what do we see? Another liquor store. What is that, 2 blocks? Here's one of those bodegas. I'm sure if I count to 3, we're gonna see a liquor store. 1, 2. Jerry's Liquor and Market. And you see how long we have driven around and that we have not seen one so-called supermarket. And people, that's what I call a food prison. It's just sad. I figured we have to change this. And my thing is, okay, what can I do to change it? I planted this and it was a need. Apparently, a neighbor didn't like the fact that I had beautified the parkway with edible vegetation and beautiful shading banana trees and the whole nine. And they reported me to the city because it's against the law to have edibles on your parkway. Potatoes, I just pulled this out the ground. You know, one of the reporters from LA Times heard it and he thought it was just ludicrous, you know, because I was like, if you could have couches and condoms and mattresses and you know, trash, nobody reports you. But you put, you know, agapanthus and tuberose and kale and red leaf lettuce and purple cabbage, and then you get somebody reports it. Smell that. There's no healthy food readily available around here, and that's why I did this. That was my frustration. What are we gonna eat? Well, what can we eat? Here we go. We're coming up on, this was a project I worked on with St. John Well Child and Family Centers. So this block we did, it's pretty interesting. It's probably in LA, it's probably the biggest city planting of edibles definitely in this city.
I'm one of the Right to Health organizers. So I literally was the one knocking on all these doors, talking to the community folks about this project and literally trying to get them involved. So not just getting their consent, but trying to get them to own the project and facilitate that belief that this is theirs, because they would be the ones having to water it on a daily basis. They're excited. They want to see if we're going to move on to other blocks. It's much, much more than just the plant. It's a catalyst for organizing. It's a catalyst for communal support. It's a catalyst for the St. John's to show the neighbors that we're just not here to give services. We're here to empower. We're here to give a voice to health advocacy. So it's just not a plant. It's much more than that.
The focus was to put in gardens in South Central just because I wanted people to get closer to where their food is and realize, you know, to have a kid not know what a tomato is or that French fries are potatoes. In some cases, a lot of cases, they're not potatoes. They're made in a lab somewhere. So I wanted to do that. My option is way better than grass. We're not cows. We can't eat grass. Grass is not creating shade. You know, grass is not creating an ecosystem. I'm sure before you leave here, you will see hummingbirds fighting, butterflies. You can see all the bees on this basil. Grass doesn't do that. When you put this in, you're actually creating life. You know, it's a joy to me when kids pass by here and say, "Daddy, it's a jungle." The fact that I hadn't planned on this and the journey where it's taken me is life-changing. You can leave that there.
Oh,
That's basic. Yeah, just we call that chop and drop.
Okay.
You know, just chop it and leave it there because it's gonna decompose. I find these the youth, they want to work. They don't want to be doing something bad in the street. A lot of them want, but they have no direction, and so this gives them a purpose, and they learn a life lesson. I'm trying to be what I wish somebody was to me, you know, and that's it's to show them, you know, there's another way, but you know, I want to know that there's a future and other stuff besides the things that you think that you've been shown. That I'm trying to have them see, not biopic, but in 360 hydrophonic HD, you know, super duper extra HD, you know, CinemaScope. When this came on me, I didn't know that you would be here, that I would be the center of this fight. Like I didn't know it was a fight. I decided to beautify the parkway in front of my house. I didn't plan for this. So now I'm involved in getting policy change. I'm involved in educating kids. I'm involved in employing people. You know, I'm involved in making people's lives more healthy. And the lessons to be learned in this, they're endless. The bottom line is we're all connected. I don't want to see somebody across the street from me dying and me not assist them. I feel that our neighborhoods are literally under siege. You know, they're being terrorized. All these new forms of cancer that no one's ever heard from, and the diabetes. And a lot of this stuff is food related. Change your diet. Let your food be thy medicine. And that's what I think we have to get back to. People act like it's a miracle. It's not a miracle. I don't want this to be special. I don't want nobody to drive by here and think this special. I want people to say, my tomatoes are way bigger than his. My tomatoes are sweeter than his. That's what I want. Just like grass is not special, I don't want this to be special, you know? I think growing your own food is a grassroots rebellion. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be.
Growing vegetables along city sidewalks may seem like a renegade act, but what about in the suburbs? Some laws can make you a criminal in your own backyard.
Over here, you know, it looks like I'm almost ashamed, some tomato plants that are failing. I bought the property in 1996, and I was very excited to have land with full sun that I could grow lots of vegetables. Ever since I was a little boy, I've loved growing vegetables. Sometimes I'd be so excited I couldn't even sleep thinking about, you know, going out planting something. These are baby cabbage plants. I couldn't believe it. I was fined $1,000 for growing too many vegetables. I wasn't selling vegetables on the property. I even called the county many times to try and get an answer. And I got an answer in the planning department, and the man told me that I could grow vegetables, I just couldn't sell them on the property. And so I went by his word. But then I continued to get citations from the code enforcement. And I was upset. I was scared. I didn't know why. I felt like I was being singled out. I needed to have the property rezoned. And so I had the property rezoned the following summer with unanimous approval. Shortly after the rezoning, I received a call from the county saying, you know, they wanted to fine me $5,000. $5,000 for growing crops. In 1996, it was a permittable use, but the code changed in 1999 where vegetables were taken out. You can have horse, chickens, or pigeons, but you can't have any vegetables. That's what I was told in court.
It was the county zoning department that told the suburban farmer he was not allowed to grow so many plants in a residential area.
People will grow an ornamental cabbage, but they won't grow a real cabbage anymore. It's kind of absurd, isn't it?
Author and organic lawn expert Paul Tukey questions the logic in these commonplace laws and encourages people to fight back.
People need to lead by example. When you have a silly, archaic law where you can't grow food in your own front yard, I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous. Go ahead and do it anyway. Run to the newspaper, use the media to point out the absurdity. It is amazing to me how some homeowners associations, some municipalities won't allow food to be grown in the front yard. Homeowners associations, they're the owners. The folks who live there, they need to stand up and make it a democracy and say, this is what we want. And I've been places where there's been petition drives among the owners. You get 80% of the owners who want to be able to grow food, they're going to get their way eventually. They just have to make sure their voices are heard.
A lot of people came and supported me at the rezoning, and I ended up having to do public service, but I didn't have to do the fine, 50 hours of public service. I felt that, I'm using the land in an eco-friendly way. I mean, I'm not using chemicals, I'm not growing grass, I'm growing food. People should definitely care because food is essential for our survival. There were times years ago when people grew their own food because they didn't have the money to buy everything that they ate. So I cannot understand why people don't have permission to grow food. The reason why I do this is because this is therapy to me. And I also do it as a learning experience, teaching other people how to grow their own instead of, having them as customers, teaching them how to be professional farmers on a very small scale. It is going to be my legacy because when I was a child, most people were farmers and they knew about growing vegetables, and today it's kind of like a lost art.
About 15% of Americans grow their own food today, compared to some 50% 50 years ago. Let's take a look into history and find out some reasons why.
In the spring of 1993 is when I really started to notice the symptoms. It was blurred vision and nosebleeds and headaches, and it happened to correspond with the spring when we're chasing dandelions around people's properties with chemicals. The first doctor I went to said it was the stress of running an adult daycare center known as a lawn care business. It took a couple doctors later, I wound up in Boston, diagnosed with acute chemical sensitivity. The doctor said, if you keep using all those lawn chemicals, you're gonna wind up killing yourself. You look at the labels, the material safety data sheets for all these things, and they all say they caused the symptoms that I had, whether it was the headaches or the blurred vision. Children now who are exposed to those substances get the headaches, but on every Saturday morning across the country, but they don't know where it came from. So maybe they lay down on the couch, maybe they take an aspirin. You don't run to the doctor typically for everything, but we're poisoning folks with the stuff that we're using to make lawns beautiful. Well, the history of lawns goes back to Britain, really, in the 1700s when the kings had lots of money and they had peasants with scythes and they making these lawns, and it was nice for their friends to come over in their high hats and their long dresses, and it was nice and mowed down. Well, the Americans, when they settled this country, brought that aesthetic with them. They wanted the wide open green spaces. It was also a safety factor. It was a fire factor, so there was some legitimate reasons to have lawns. Lawns are not bad by nature. They aren't the bad guy. It's how we care for lawns. This is all tied to the color television, the whole lawn care industry. They go to Fenway Park or Yankee Stadium, or they see something on television, and the men of America, it was like Dorothy Gale landing in Oz. It's like, wow, look at that green. I want that in my yard. And in fact, the lawn chemical companies started advertising a fairway front lawn. And a lot of the companies went from these little mom and pop shops to these billion-dollar companies almost overnight. If you go back to World War II, we grew some staggering amount of food right in our own properties. About 50% of the food in this country was grown. Everybody had a plot. Everybody had a victory garden. Well, you start getting obsessed with a lawn, and suddenly a garden is ugly. In fact, I know lots of friends of mine who will consciously put their vegetable garden in the front yard, and their neighbors will, oh, that's bad, you can't do that. And in fact, the ability to grow food is mankind's greatest skill. If you think about it, we don't have a greater skill. So again, I don't think lawns are bad, but let's reduce the size of our lawn. Let's start growing food again. Wouldn't that be a better outcome, a better use of your property? I think this whole idea of this aesthetic at all costs is nothing more than a cultural malaise. It's an advertising gimmick that can be fixed. And in fact, in Canada, they've fixed it. The first municipalities in Canada banned lawn chemicals 25 years ago. And now in Canada, if you don't have a couple of dandelions on your front lawn and a little bit of clover, the neighbors look down their nose at you. They figure that you must be running to the United States and buying the illegal poisons, sneaking them back into Canada and putting them out on your lawn. More and more and more in the news, we're seeing the products used to kill weeds showing up in the health reports. We're finding out more and more that this stuff is not healthy. You can't keep it out of the reach of children. It's winding up in the drinking water. It's in the soil. We're touching it, we're feeling it, we're eating it. And so the whole point of going organic is let's get that stuff out of our food, let's get it off our lawns, and let's treat the planet better.
A Georgia farmer is leading by example. He's transformed his factory farm into a sustainable one by working with nature instead of fighting it.
My great-grandfather came to this farm in 1866. He'd been a cavalry officer in the Southern Cavalry. My daughters are here today, and they're the 5th generation on this farm. If at the peak of our factory farming experience, you had told me or my father, you're really not treating your land and animals well, we would have whipped you, because we believe we were. After World War II, there was a perfect storm. For the first time ever, nitrogen fertilizer was cheap and abundant and available to farmers. The pesticides that we came to use came from World War II's nerve gas research. If you looked at the charts, you would see that corn production in this country was this, and then post-World War II just became, in fact, there was too much corn. I was born in 1954, but I can remember seeing on the windows of grocery stores written in soap, premium grain-fed Midwestern beef. And it was touted as though the feeding of grain to cattle was to improve the quality. Well, my father and later I were involved in that movement, and I got the big tip for you, just quietly. It was never about improving quality. It was always about the money. The way to get the most money out of 7 pounds of corn was feed it to a cow and turn it into a pound of beef. So the feedlot industry was born. Since World War II, science has given farmers an arsenal of tools that we can use to increase production. And with every one of those, the unforeseen circumstance of using them is never discussed. And in most of those cases, it takes a long time to see it. You could spread ammonium nitrate on that pasture today. If we got a little rain tonight, tomorrow it would be a notably different color. It would be a richer, darker green. If you walked in it, you could tell this grass is taller, it's growing. What you can't see is the use of that nitrogen product oxidizes the organic matter in the soil. And it turns that rich, living organic medium into a dead mineral medium. The primary problem with improving the well-being of land and water is that you can destroy the integrity very quickly, but it takes a long, long time to fix it. It's the difference for me in, I want to be big and strong, but I want to do it quick. So I buy some steroids, I spend a little time in the gym, and I'm big and strong. There's some unintended consequences to that. Another way of getting big and strong is you start a lot earlier and you spend a lot of time in the gym and you wind up big and strong, but you still have your testicular weight. Factory farm production is more about taking the tools that science has given us, which are used to combat nature, versus a non-factory farm, which uses natural symbiotic relationships to work in cooperation with nature. Nature abhors a monoculture. Nature would never allow it. So in the factory farm model, a shirt factory, you make shirts. Car factory, you make cars. Hog farm, factory farm, you make hogs. This is 5,000 heritage breed turkeys. They're 2 to 3 months old. They'll follow you if you walk. Come on, come on, come on. none of us can feed a population that exponentially increases and increases and increases. If you won't stipulate that, you're too stupid to talk to. And invariably, the most hardcore will say, yeah, you know, there can be too many people. Say, okay, good. Well, I'll go ahead and concede up front right now that if the first thing we're going to run out of is land, your system wins. You can produce more food on an acre of land than I can if that's the only issue we're concerned about. You win. Now, if fossil fuel is a limiting factor, I win. Because I don't take as much fossil fuel as you do. If water is the limiting factor, I win. Because I don't take as much water as you do. If polluting the ocean and dead zones is the issue, I win. I don't do that. So truly, if it's all about the land, you win. If it's about just about anything else, I win. Why should people care? It requires the person to educate themselves on how food is produced, form opinions on what's important to them, and if they choose to do so and they want to make changes, they're going to have to write a little bigger check at the checkout counter. As long as I can find a group of caring consumers that support the way I farm, then it allows me to do the right things for my 85 employees, 24,500 acres of land, and the flocks and herds that live here. It's a good place to be a hog.
How can you be part of the change? Start with an heirloom garden. Heirloom crops are not genetically engineered, and seeds are passed from generation to generation. If seeds are not saved, genetic biodiversity and our ability to fight blight and disease dies along with them.
Basically, all an heirloom is if you think about your grandmother's heirloom jewelry, it's something that's old and something that's valuable. But the reason that I'm really excited about heirloom crops is a lot of them, they taste great. They're wonderful, they're beautiful, they're unique. We're growing a variety of corn that has every color of the rainbow in each different kernel. But for me, the most persuasive thing about heirlooms is that they are valuable. They're something that if people don't continue to grow them, they'll go away. And as a farmer, I try to stay away from becoming dependent on one thing over time. So the more I can increase our biodiversity here at the farm, the better off we're gonna be for the long haul. We're growing food that has a story, it has a history, and it's something that can't be faked. So we have what we're calling the Garlington leek. There was one of the ancestors that lived here in the plantation, and his name was actually Garlington leek. This property has been in the same family since 1809, and walking around the property, one of our guys here discovered this little beautiful purple flower growing out of the ground in what used to be an old sharecropper home site, and popped it out, and sure enough, it's this giant, beautiful elephant garlic, which is also related to the leek, and taxonomically it's the same. And so basically over time, we've been pulling it and saving it, and this is a great example of what an heirloom crop is. So during the winter, we can sell it as a leek. During the summer, after we harvest it, we can sell this big, beautiful head of garlic, and then we can also sell the flower. So that's 3 different things that we can sell from one plant that's been growing here for 100 years, and it's something that only grows on our farm, so we're really proud of it. Each one of these heads has 5 cloves, so if we save 75% of the crop, we can get, basically for 1,000, we can do 4,000 every year.
Is it true that 96% of the vegetable varieties are extinct?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak specifically to the statistics. I do know that if you look at what was available throughout history and what's available now, it's shrunk considerably. And we're losing valuable genetic information that we'll never get back. So it's basically an extinction of these lines that, when we need them, they won't be there available for us.
Was it more expensive to do an heirloom garden?
If you're going to take the time to start a garden, once you start sowing it and once you start bringing food back, you're going to save a lot of money over going to the grocery store. It might take some time to realize those savings. You're still going to pay for the seeds, But then if you get heirloom seeds that are open pollinated and you learn how to save those seeds, you're your own seed company. And so you'll ultimately save money and kind of create your own varieties over time.
And how do you save the seeds?
Depends on the crop, but some things are really easy. So, you know, you grow a pumpkin, you split that pumpkin open. Instead of eating the pumpkin seeds, you dry them out and you plant them the next year. Watermelon's the same way, so fruiting crops are pretty easy. Your things like your broccoli and your kale, they're basically unopened flowers. You let the flowers open, they put out these nice little seed pods, you let them dry, you crack them, and then you have your seeds for next year. The plants want to reproduce. That's how genetically they've come up through time. So you just basically set aside and let them do the work. You know, no one knows if it's going to work until somebody tries it, and there are more and more people sticking their necks out there every day to try to give it a go. I've been doing this for maybe 6, 7 years now, and I've seen a huge shift in people interested in food and local food and food policy that, yeah, I think there's a huge future in it.